Now, for the third largest funding portal out there, and the one that, in my opinion, has made the most traction and change and momentum in 2019, we're going to be looking at Republic. That's over at republic.co. Today, we're going to give an overview and a review of the Republic platform, and then check out the next video where we're actually going to provide a demo and a complete in-depth walkthrough of going through the Republic platform. This is Brian from Crowdwise. Let's get into it. So Republic as a platform has been very exciting in 2019. They've rolled out what I think is one of the most exciting things that I've seen to date and something that's very new, which is the Note token, and we'll be talking about that. But in addition, they overtook Seedinvest in terms of the total amounts of capital raised to make them the number 3 slot in terms of the largest funding portals for regulation crowdfunding. So in terms of the highlights, again, they are that number 3 slot now, being the third largest funding portal by capital raised. Now, their deal flow is considerably lower than WeFunder and StartEngine, but what's interesting is that the amount of capital raised per deal has been higher than StartEngine, and it is more on par with WeFunder. The CEO and co-founder is Ken Nguyen, who is formerly from AngelList. So they have a lot of the AngelList backing, who, for those of you familiar with that platform for accredited investors and who know Naval Ravikant and others, it is a very powerful force behind this platform. Now, one of the key differences between Republic and the first 2 platforms that we reviewed, WeFunder and StartEngine, is that Republic also does additional due diligence and deal curation. This means they go above and beyond just the minimum requirements for regulation crowdfunding, and you may have to meet minimum revenue targets and have a certain viable business model. And what that means is that investors who invest in the platform can know that the companies that are listed have been vetted by the Republic team as a good potential investment, in their opinion. It's not necessarily just a company that met all the minimum checks, but they actually think it could be a potential good investment opportunity. This doesn't mean, of course, that there's any lower risk. These are all still very early stage companies and startups, so you still need to make sure as an investor you diversify, but it is good something to be aware of, that if you're a little more constrained on time and you don't want to have to do as much of the due diligence yourself, Republic may be a portal that's more for you. And as I mentioned as well, the Note token, that was something that has recently been launched within the last year or 2, but they have some very exciting plans for the Note token as well, where in the future, if they can get all the regulations and everything else lined up, they actually plan to have the Note token become a part ownership in any successful exits of any Republic portfolio company. So you could think of it as almost a passive index fund of sorts, where if you hold these Note tokens, you'll get a share in any of the successful exits from Republic companies. So I think that it's very neat. The Republic team is definitely doing a lot of interesting things. So let's now take a closer look in terms of more details of the platform. As I mentioned, they're number 3rd in terms of capital raised in 2019. And Form C filings, you can see here in blue is Republic. It is considerably less than StartEngine and WeFunder. But again, they've only raised about $5 million less than StartEngine, despite having about 40% of the number of Form C filings. So that means that the average amount raised per deal has been higher on Republic than on StartEngine. It is more on par with WeFunder, but again, it's definitely an exciting thing to be watching as these platforms continue to grow, and I think Republic is surely one to keep your eyes on. So let's go over a quick pros and cons list for Republic as a platform. In terms of pros, as we mentioned, capital raised, they were basically one of the biggest changes in 2019 where they overtook Seedinvest for that 3rd spot. And I think that they're going to continue to gain momentum just based on what I'm seeing on the platform. So they'll be someone to watch in 2020. In addition, the average deal size is more on par with WeFunder, so it's a bit higher, whereas StartEngine has, say, more than twice as many offerings, but has only raised about $5 million more. So same thing with Seedinvest. You're going to see an average deal size being higher on WeFunder and Republic. In terms of the community, I think this is one of the biggest pros that Republic currently has going for them. Between them creating the Note token and the engagements with users that that's creating, but also having investor groups that have actually been very active from my experience in checking out what some of these people are sharing in terms of their ideas and screening deals. It's been really interesting to watch. So I think the community is overall one of the pros for this platform. And then for investors, there's no investor fees. So even if you invest with a credit card, there's no fees, but that is because it is actually a con for startups and that the startups have to pay that fee. So we'll get to that shortly. But in addition, Republic also has one of the platforms that has token offerings. So people who are more interested in cryptography, the whole kind of crypto scene, and some of the companies are actually doing their offerings in tokens. So if that's something that interests you as an investor or as a founder who's looking to do that type of thing, Republic may be the right platform for you. Now, as I mentioned, the biggest con right now, I think, from my eyes for either investors or founders is that it has higher fees than WeFunder for startups, because you do have to cover things like the investor credit card fee. But in addition, there's a Form C filing fee of $1,500. You got to pay the escrow fee, which they estimate to be about $1,500. And then the overall fees structure that we'll get into is about 8% total, between 6% being through the total amount raised and 2% of the security sold. So overall, slightly higher fees, but one could argue you're getting more value from it. Basically, if you go through this more rigorous process, you're going to have potentially more investors on the other end who the barrier and kind of the threshold for them to invest, knowing that you already were screened by the Republic company, could be much lower. So maybe you get more investments. But because of that, and because they do additional due diligence and deal curation, some startups who are perhaps not well suited for a kind of more tech focused or already having revenues company may not be able to get approved to launch on this portal, whereas you may be able to get approved to launch on StartEngine or WeFunder. So that's just something to keep in mind. It could be a potential con for some of the startups out there. Now, in terms of neutral, again, for the investors, just to be aware that there is extra due diligence and deal curation on Republic as a portal. This means that you perhaps don't have to spend as much time doing your own due diligence if you don't want to, but you know that the deals that are being presented have been vetted already as potential good investment opportunities. And in terms of uniques, the note token, and we're going to get into it and talk to it a lot more detail when we actually dive in next video on the demo and the platform walkthrough. But just know that you get rewards. It's kind of a gamification. You may get a certain number of notes for making comments or for investing in a certain number of deals or for being helpful to other investors. And it kind of gamifies the whole experience for investors. And I think that it's really led to higher engagement. But the future is, I think, what's very interesting with the note token, where Republic is planning, as I mentioned, to make it kind of a revenue share almost of any Republic portfolio company that has a potential exit. You get to share in some of that ownership and get some of those profits and proceeds. So keep an eye on the note token. I think that's really going to be interesting to see how that develops in the coming years. As a platform overview, in terms of the key numbers for Republic, they have over 250,000 investors as the last that they've published in terms of 2019. As I mentioned, the deal flow, so compared to WeFunder and StartEngine for 2019, who both had about close to 105 to 110, they've only had 40 Form C filings, which means 40 companies raise. However, they've still raised nearly $16 million, as you can see here, which is perhaps an indication that their average deal size is higher than a platform like StartEngine. In addition, we mentioned the due diligence and deal curation. They do the additional due diligence and deal curation, so just be aware of that. There are no investor fees, so it may be a positive for investors out there. But because of that, someone's got to pay it. The issuers usually eat the cost if you're accepting credit cards. There's a 3.5% fee, and then there's some additional Form C and escrow fees as well to the 6% of amount raised and 2% of securities sold overall fee on the platform. So a little more than in WeFunder, but as we mentioned, it's perhaps, you're being more thoroughly vetted, and so you could see potentially more investors on the other side. In addition, unique incentives, the note token, we're going to be talking more about that, so check out the video. Secondary market, no. So right now, StartEngine is the only one that's developing it, and then Net Capital has a type of secondary market currently live, which is the only funding portal that we'll be talking about in that video. And you can invest with a credit card on this platform, so that's good. Okay, that wraps up the intro for Republic. Next, check out that video where we're actually going to log into our account and give you a walkthrough and a demo of the platform. If you haven't already, whether you're an investor or a founder, head over to crowdwise.org/portals. And you'll get your Reg CF, that's your Regulation Crowdfunding Comparison Checklist, which basically takes all these funding portals out there for the top 8 and compares them on things such as fees, deal flow, capital raised, etc. This is Brian from Crowdwise. I want to thank you for tuning in. We'll see you back here for the next video.